So in this, our penultimate episode of our world history series, I could make a good argument that this film probably doesn't necessarily belong in a world history podcast, simply because not only is it not a specific historical event or historical people like we always try to do, or if we don't do, it at least speaks to the culture of a certain part of the world. And About Elly doesn't quite check off those boxes. It does peripherally deal with and give us room to talk about the culture of Iran, but really it's just a good movie set in Iran, and outside of that, there's not really a lot for a history podcast to talk about.
Yeah, and there are a couple things in this movie that are Iran specific,
Yes.
like the people and their relationship to the cops, and like the men's relationship to the women, and the culture stuff as far as like being engaged to someone else or being divorced being
true.
more taboo than it is in the United States. But it really is. It's just a good like drama, almost thriller movie that just happens to be made and set in Iran. Like this is a movie, and I hate's a strong word. I don't usually really like American remakes of movies that are made other places, but I think that if you remade this movie as with an American cast, and they're speaking English, and it's just the same story but with actors speaking English, I think it would work really well. Like I think people would like it.
I was even going to say, I'm surprised it has not been remade, since it is 10, 11 years old, and is honestly, and this is a strong statement, unlike any movie I've ever seen as far as what the plot and the conflict is. I'm like, so it's kind of like it's like a mystery thriller, but really just a drama about friends. And so the two movies that I would compare it to, although it's kind of a stretch, would be The Big Chill and then Hitchcock's Rebecca from 1940. And Big Chill, just in the sense that it's a bunch of friends getting together to hang out and they're having fun, but then also dealing with a lot of serious issues in their personal lives. So there's that. And then Rebecca, in that the titular character in Rebecca is not in the film at all. And in Elly, and About Elly, she's not in it past the kind of beginning. It's fascinating.
Right. And it's you would be forgiven if you saw the cover or the poster of this movie and thought, oh, the girl on the cover, that must be Elly. No, that's not Elly.
Oh, that didn't even occur to me. You're right. I'm looking at it right now, and you're right. That's not the actress that plays Elly. That didn't even occur to me.
Ellie's actually, she's only in the movie for like 20 minutes, which that was confusing for me when I first started the movie. Because I'm like, okay, why do they keep calling her Sepida and then they call this other girl Elly? Like, am I missing something? And it turns out that I was missing something. The movie is not. I mean, it's about Elly, but it's more about everyone else.
Yeah. So again, I want to kind of. This is one probably more than most two. I really do want to give people a chance to watch this before we start getting into spoilers. So if you're a fan of foreign film, go out and watch this before finishing this episode.
Yeah, and I will say that even though, and I don't know how you watched this.
On Vudu.
Okay, so did you rented it?
Yes.
So this movie does exist on YouTube in its entirety with English subtitles.
Okay.
For free. There's the paid official version, but it does exist, and there are a couple of other instances of this video on YouTube that are English subtitled that do not require renting.
Of questionable legality as far as copyright goes.
Right, and I'm not sure, like, the one I watched had been up for a long time, though, and had quite a few views, so I'm not really sure. But like Mulad, there are places where the subtitles are a little strange.
Oh, see, and I had no issue with that.
Right. Specifically, the only punctuation is question marks and periods. So like anytime an apostrophe would show up to like make something possessive, or anytime it would, there would be like quotation marks or something, it was just another letter. And that kind of got confusing because you're like, why there was a while I thought that, they kept saying, go get Ellie F's this,
Oh.
Ellie F's that. And I'm like, why are they calling her Ellie F? Well, it's because for whatever reason,
In the translation,
F
yeah.
was the character that replaced the apostrophe in the subtitles.
Okay, so rent it on Vudu.
Yeah, I mean, it is a little bit confusing. But if you were just absolutely like, I don't have the money, or I don't want to spend the money on a movie that I'm not sure about,
I gotcha.
you can watch it on YouTube. But watch it on Vudu, because that's probably the way to make sure that you're in the clear legally.
And honestly, getting some money back to the creators, which I do think is important, especially from these non-blockbuster films.
Yes, but it's more than just like, oh, this is good, for a movie that's not from the United States, which I would never qualify a movie. This is just a really good movie.
Right. Yeah, and actually I did see on this Wikipedia page, it says basically right after it came out, it was already heralded as the 4th best movie ever in the history of Iran, as far as their own cinema goes.
Yeah, I mean, this is the only movie from Iran that I've ever seen.
Okay, so this is the 3rd movie by this director I've seen, and they're all just excellent. The director is Asghar Farhadi, and 2 of his films have won Best Foreign Film at the Oscar. That does not include this one. He's also been nominated for Best Screenplay.
We had talked about that before, that this guy he's at the Oscar, like his movies are in the Best Foreign Film category pretty regularly.
Right, and yeah, this is one actually that predates a couple of the others I had seen, and I'm just realizing there's another one that's just as highly rated I need to get to. So he does kind of focus on these very, very realistic character dramas that also maybe have some other element of secrecy or revelations that do kind of almost make them thrillers while also just being character dramas. Like, I would say that's probably the theme throughout his work, and just the performances. And you mentioned always liking long takes. This film had a lot of long takes.
Yeah, I was gonna mention that they're not even like in Beasts of No Nation that we talked about recently. Like that movie has a long take. They kind of like, it kind of stands out as a long take. Like when you're watching, like, wow, this is a really cool long take. But in this movie, you don't really notice it that much unless you're just kind of always looking for long takes, which I kind of am. But there will be, I mean, like 3 takes back to back that are all like over 3 minutes.
Yes.
Like he'll do like a 4-minute take, do one cut, and then do like another 4 or 5 minute take. And you don't really even notice that it's happening, and it just, which I think is the mark of really good editing, that you don't even necessarily notice it.
Right. It calls to mind something that's Robert Altman is kind of famous for that. Or even something like, you think like The West Wing, where it's just kind of, they follow the characters, the walking and talking, but then they just follow the camera to the next character, and you leave behind all with one shot. So it's almost like you're in that real world. Again, Robert Altman is kind of famous for that. So it definitely has that kind of feel to it.
I have been watching West Wing recently. Like, it's my go-to like something to have on while I'm doing something else. So maybe that's why. Maybe I'm just like been on the lookout for longer takes, because I do like that walk and talk kind of style.
Yeah, so you definitely have this here. So again, we're gonna go ahead and get into the details of the plot and spoil some things, and then kind of come back and talk about Iran and other things. So the whole idea is that a group of friends are going to, well, it's like the lake or the beach, but again, this is in Iran, so they're going up to the Caspian Sea.
Right.
And 2 of the friends are single. So it's basically like 3 couples and some kids, and then 2 single friends that they're trying to basically have meet each other to see if they like each other. And
yes.
the girl in that, hopeful hookup or whatever is Elly, and the guy is visiting from Germany. Now, he's Iranian too, but he's been living in Germany. So they're hoping these 2 will hit it off. And
the girl is she's the kindergarten teacher, who I would say is arguably the main character.
Right, Sepida or whatever.
Sepida. It's her kid's kindergarten teacher. Is Elly. And
again, it's just kind of normal. You don't really know where it's going, because I didn't know anything about this film going in. So it's just like them dealing with, reservation issues with the beach house, and just making the plans to clean up the place, and just the normal logistics of friends hanging out. Just again, it reminds me of The Big Chill. It's just very realistic, just dealing with these practical things. And then there's a turn where the little kids come up to yell at their dad while he's playing volleyball that the brother is in the water and needs saving. And we had last seen Elly kind of in charge of them and flying a kite. And then there's this cut, which at first I thought was just like a quick, had a minute pass. So we really don't know how much time from when we saw Elly flying the kite to then the kids are worried about their brother in the water. It's, probably somewhere between, 2 to 30 minutes as far as time passing. And they save the boy. And again, because I don't know anything about this film, I'm like, oh my gosh, is the kid going to be dead? They're going to blame Elly because she was supposed to be watching him. And after they save the boy, they're like, well, shoot, now where's Elly? And the kids are too little to really know what was going on or give you a play-by-play on where she ended up.
Right, because, when we say kids, these are like, it's like a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old.
Right.
Like, they're not...
Right. The boy who was in the water was like 7, yeah.
Right, and he's the oldest one.
Right.
And so these kids are not going to be able to be like, okay, so Mom, Dad, here's what happened. Let me give you a rundown of exactly.
Right.
They're just screaming and yelling.
Right. The first little kid who runs to tell Dad about her brother being in the water is like 2, and she's just like, Dad, and then says her brother's name, Amir or whatever.
Right.
And that's all she knows wants to say. She's like, I need Dad, and Dad needs to go get my brother, and I'm stuck. That's all the words I know.
Yep.
So the bulk of the movie is these friends trying to figure out, wait, so did Elly get in the water and is now lost at sea having tried to save the boy? Or did she just up and leave and go back to Tehran because she said she had to?
Because she said, she kept talking about how she wanted to leave, and everyone was kind of trying to talk her out of it. Well, Sepida, the main character, was trying to talk her out of it. There was like a couple of the other people that say, hey, look, if she wants to leave, just let her leave.
Right. She had only agreed to come for one day. She had a mom with health issues. He was a little questionable about the setup thing, but basically had a bunch of reasons. She had already planned on just staying for one day and leaving the next day. That time had come. Sepida was kind of bullying her in a friendly way into staying, and so we don't know. And I legit the whole it's this crazy tension that it created. I had no idea.
And that was I kind of thought that was what it was going to be. Is that she had left, and then something else, there was going to be some other fallout from that.
Right, or miscommunication. Right, so you also don't know how to feel. So basically you're trying to figure out, is Elly a hero who drowned trying to save the boy, or a villain who just left the kids alone on the beach to go back to Tehran? And you don't know which way to feel about her because you don't know her well enough.
Yeah.
And it's, again, so the whole movie is about Elly, and it's this mystery and thriller and tension is building of, is she dead, or is she just a deadbeat who went home? And the characters are going back and forth on how to feel about her, if she did one or the other, and whose fault it is for bringing her in the first place. And it's just, the tension is just kind of insane. And they really don't know.
And then they say, oh, well, we can't find her bag, so she must have left.
Oh, right.
But then Sepida, the main character, then goes in and says, no, actually, her bag's right here. It was like under the sink. Because she says, I hid it from her so that she couldn't leave.
Right. And I was kind of...
And then they said, well, maybe she left anyway. And then Sepida's husband finds out that Sepida has Elly's phone.
Right.
And so he's like, why do you have Elly's phone? And she said, I guess I just found it in her bag and forgot that I had it or something like that. Well, then they get on the phone and they're going to try and call the mom. They keep calling the mom's number, but trying to get someone else to answer because they don't want to talk to the mom.
She has health issues and they don't want to freak her out.
Right. And then they see another number that's on there that the guy that they were trying to set up with Elly says, oh, when we went to that's another kind of plot point in the story is they can't get cell reception at the house that they're staying at, so they have to drive into town.
Right.
And so they, one of the first interactions between Ahmad, who's the single guy who's from Germany, and Elly, that's the two that they're trying to set up. One of their first interactions, they go to town to get like groceries and stuff. And she gets a call that she answers but says, hey, I can't talk right now, and then kind of hangs up. And so then later on, after she's disappeared, then Ahmad remembers, oh, that's right, she got a phone call that she like quickly disconnected. Let's call that number.
And then that guy says he's her brother.
Right, he says it's her brother. And so they say, okay, well, we'll have him come here and meet us. but they don't want to outright say that she drowned because they're still not.
Right, they don't know.
They're not necessarily sure.
Right.
So they say that she's in a car accident.
Which again, the line kind of annoyed me, but it didn't seem necessarily unrealistic either. It was just like, again, it's also though it is because a lot of the lying does kind of tie into the specifics of Iranian culture and it being kind of. I mean, it was appropriate for them to do what they did, but again, it's maybe kind of border on inappropriate, or something her family wouldn't necessarily approve of her going out on this retreat as a single person to meet another single guy.
Which in our culture, that would not be a thing. That doesn't really matter. Like that happens all the time. But in their culture, it is more taboo to the point where at the very beginning, when they're first renting that little villa. The lady that they're renting it from, Sepida has to tell that lady, these are two newlyweds.
Right.
They just got married. So that's
everyone
why,
has to be married. So yeah.
Right. Yeah. Which that comes up again then later towards the end of the story. But so they call this guy who they think is her brother, and Ahmad and Sepida go to meet him in the town. And on the way, Sepida confesses to Ahmad that Elly was engaged to a guy who she didn't want to be engaged with, but she felt trapped because she's scared of him, and that's the guy that they're going to meet.
Right, 'cause she has no siblings. She told me she has no siblings too. Yeah.
Right, and that Elly. So this is for sure the fiance.
Right.
That Elly was running away from to meet you.
Right. Yeah. So then that becomes kind of the conflict in the final third of the film is dealing with the fiance.
Right.
Who they have to protect themselves from the knowledge that, you took an engaged woman to retreat?
Because in Iran, that is an actual crime.
Oh, so there's another sticking point, too. I guess I knew it was taboo for sure. I didn't think about it being a legit crime.
Which that is, it's kind of like that would work in an American movie. I don't necessarily like comparing foreign movies to American movies in this way, but just for the sake of the fact that like the vast majority of our audience is American, that is something that would kind of, it would be like a drama thing that would work in an American movie or American TV show. That you have this girl who's running away from her fiance to be. I mean, think of Titanic. It's almost the exact same thing.
Right.
But you just have this extra added layer. The stakes are just a lot higher. Because in Iran, not only is that like a big drama thing relationship wise, but it's also an actual crime. Like if those people had all known that she was engaged to be married to someone else, and then they took her on this trip to try and hook him up with another guy,
right?
They would all be considered complicit in an actual crime that they could actually be punished for legally.
Interesting. Which again, though, so that was even one of my notes is. So why the heck did they go ahead if they said, hey, everyone, quick, you have to pretend this guy's her brother and not her fiance, but you didn't know that he was the fiance, and so I'm telling you right now. It's like, just don't tell them. Just let them be ignorant. And I don't understand why they felt the need to honesty vomit on their friends there and make them complicit when they could have just not told them the truth there right before that guy, he shows up at the resort. I don't know. That seems.
Yeah, I don't.
Well, again, it didn't seem unrealistic. It just seemed like a mistake. Like if you're trying to get away with this, the last thing you should do is bring your friends into the secret.
Well, I think that they wanted to bring them in just because they didn't want anyone saying like, "Oh, yeah, this it sucks that we brought Elly here to hook up with this guy."
Gotcha. Because you might say that to the brother, but you wouldn't say it to the fiance.
Right.
Okay, that's why. Okay,
exactly.
That makes sense then. Again, I didn't realize to what extent that was actually illegal. I just knew it was frowned upon. Because again, it's frowned upon in the United States, but it's literally a crime over there. Is a little different.
Yeah. So then Ahmad and the fiance go to, I don't remember why it was that they went to the lady's house. Oh no, she came there. Or did they? What was the reason that they went to the old lady's house, the lady that owns the villa?
I thought it was just phone reception.
That was probably it.
She had a landline, so they would go into town to use their cell phones. That's right. She has a landline
because the fiance went to call somebody, and while they're there, the old lady says, "Oh, that bed for the newlyweds, don't worry about it. I'll come pick it up at some point." And so the brother realizes what's going on,
or the fiance,
and Ahmad then Ahmad said, realizes, oh, he knows that I know that he knows, kind of thing.
Right.
And so he gets in his car and books it back to the house.
To tell everybody, yeah.
And says, hey, everyone, the jig is up. Like, the fiance knows everything. And so then they're waiting for the fiance to get back, and they're debating, saying, because that's when Sepideh spills the beans.
Well, Sepideh stays with him to tell him the whole drowning story, though, too, on the way back. We kind of missed that part. So because they initially told him it was a car wreck, and then so now she's told him about the drowning possibility, but we're still not 100% sure. But she brought him up to speed on all that, but hasn't told him about the whole,
I did skip that.
Whole other thing with the relationship that's now complicated. Again, we're kind of sounding like this is a bit of a mess. There's no problems understanding it during the film, but
no. Yeah. We're just bad at explaining stuff, especially explaining it in order. But when you watch the movie, it's a lot. Just watch the movie.
But you can tell from our excitement we really enjoyed it. Yeah.
Right. If you've gotten to this point and you haven't watched the movie yet, we're probably 3/4 of the way through the movie, but it's go watch it.
Right. You'll still enjoy it. And and this whole, but as a viewer too, this whole time you're still thinking maybe she's in Tehran. Like you still have hope. So yes, the guy's mad. He ends up punching Ahmad.
Right. And the final kind of conflict is what do they tell him? Do they tell him, well, because everyone else is saying basically, we had no idea she was engaged, otherwise we wouldn't have done this.
Which is true,
but Sepideh is like,
she's like, but I knew. She's
kind of torn because she's like, do I defend her honor? And say,
oh, right. The truth makes Elly look bad, but if she's not around to, let's kind of be good to her.
The truth makes Elly look better because it says, oh, she was afraid of you. She didn't want to be with you.
Oh, right. But she's still complicit then.
She did initially refuse to come, and Sepideh had to convince her.
Right.
So the truth makes Elly look better because it's like she was actually conflicted. She didn't initially want to come. We had to convince her, which that would then make them all complicit in a crime. Whereas if she says, oh no, I asked Elly if she wanted to come on this trip and she said yes right away. She had no reservations whatsoever.
Which is what she tells the fiance.
Then that puts all of the onus on Elly and none on the group itself.
Which is ultimately the route they take. Because she does tell him that she didn't hesitate. That she's basically said, yes, I didn't have to force her here. Yeah. Which is almost, though, I don't know. I guess it's tough because we don't really get to know the fiance very well. We just know that Elly wasn't happy with him.
Right. But we only know one side of the story.
Exactly. We see nothing that makes you think he's a bad guy or a creep or anything like that.
Right. And I mean, the only negative interaction that we see with him, with anybody, is him punching Ahmad in the face. But that's kind of understandable if you,
given the circumstances.
If you just got called up, you said, hey, drive all this way to, meet these people, and they tell you, number one, your fiance is probably dead, and also she was with this other dude, for the whole weekend,
right?
So completely understandable.
Nice to meet you.
Yeah,
and so then the climax of the film was basically, hey, the authorities have found a body. We need to go identify it and see if it's Elly. And you're still, as the viewer. Honestly, I was thinking it was like 70-30. It was not going to be her. It was going to be someone else. And we were still going to find her.
Oh, really?
And there's going to be some excuse as to like, somehow she's still the good person, but also left because she thought she's put someone. I was still hopeful. And honestly, even when they show the body, since she's in a body bag, I couldn't recognize that it was for sure her.
And they only they unzip it, but it's like half of her face is covered up.
Right.
And there's like hair in her face and she's got sand all over her.
The only thing that makes me know 100%, because and then even then in his grief, he might have been seeing wrong or thinking wrong. So the only thing that makes me 100% sure it was her is the fact that the movie ended.
Right. Yeah. That and then when I was doing research and read the plot summary, it says,
right.
The fiance positively identifies her and becomes really sad and starts sobbing. It's like, oh, okay, so that was exactly what happened.
Well, and one of my movie rules that I have, kind of preached for a long time now is no corpse, no death. So, because movies will do that all the time, so this one takes takes that idea in a very interesting direction. It plays with your expectations and knowing that movies will often trick you into thinking someone is dead by not actually showing you their body. This does that the other way, where I keep having hope that she's alive and assume she's alive because we haven't seen the corpse, even when the officials say she'll for sure wash up overnight. They don't make it like a question. They make it like, yes, the way it works, if she drowned here, she will 100% wash up overnight, and then she doesn't. And so you're still kind of just always hopeful until the very end, where you're like, oh, she did go in and try to save the boy, and she drowned. Yeah. And this is a tragedy. And yeah, just a fascinating movie. A really, really good movie that's as depressing as that sounds. It's not that much of a downer of a movie. It's just more of it's just real, and it's conflicted. Again, it's almost a horror movie without the horror, and just the way it kind of builds, I feel like, and the tension. And again, it's not as intense as that, but I almost feel like structure-wise, I feel like it plays out like a horror film in a way.
Kind of, yeah.
But it's not scary, other than just the real-life tension.
Right, and that's why I would call it more of a thriller.
Yeah, that's fair. Okay, that's probably fair. It's like a low-stakes thriller. I don't want to say low-stakes because she's, it's basically, is she dead or not? But yeah, again, I'll say like I said at the very beginning, I don't think I've ever seen a movie like this, which I've seen a lot of movies, it turns out. And the other thing I was going to say is I feel like maybe it's because this guy's only Farhadi, the director, is only 48, so I almost feel like, are we just a few years from him having a Bong Joon-ho type breakout? Because Bong Joon-ho is basically doing the same thing and has been making these great movies over in Korea forever, and then boom, hit one that kind of broke through to the West. And Farhadi's already got 2 Oscar-winning movies in foreign film, and so is it just a matter of a couple years here? And boom, Farhadi's got a Best Picture.
Well, because like with Bong Joon-ho, you had Snowpiercer, which was really popular.
Well, Memories of Murder.
Parasite.
I think Bong Joon-ho had actually had not a foreign film winner, because oddly enough, Parasite was like the first Korean movie to even get a foreign film nomination or something, even though Bong Joon-ho had others that should have. But again, we've talked before a million times about how that category ends up being, or overlooking a lot of things sometimes. So I was going to mention just briefly, the Caspian Sea, which plays an important role in this film, is the world's largest inland body of water. So it's not directly connected to anything else. And I was like, oh, well, how big is that? Because, and they do say to the ancient people of this area, they just assumed it was an ocean because it was so big, which made me think of my trip to Lake Michigan 5 years ago. And I remember standing on the shore of Lake Michigan and feeling like, not necessarily ocean, but I definitely felt like sea. Like it just seems endless. Like it's even just the sound. It's this endless body of water. So I'm like, oh, how does that compare to the Caspian Sea? Oh, like not even close. Lake Michigan is 22,000 square miles. The Caspian Sea is 143,000 square miles. So almost 7 times the size of Lake Michigan. That took me a week to drive around. Obviously, I was stopping and stuff, but like I spent like a week driving around Lake Michigan 5 years ago, and the Caspian Sea is almost 7 times that size. So just massive.
It's bordered by Russia and Kazakhstan on the north, Turkmenistan to the east, Azerbaijan on the west side, and then Iran is on the south.
Yes, and Tehran is actually not too far from it. Now, the drive itself may be long, and we don't know that they went straight north to the lake. Obviously they might have gone off a little bit, but Tehran's actually not too far from the Caspian Sea.
Well, they mention, and I don't know if I'm pronouncing this correctly, but Chalice, which it looks like is a city that's right on the Caspian Sea.
Oh, okay.
And again, they are kind of in the middle of nowhere, but they do mention having to drive to Chalice at some point. So that can give you a kind of a rough geographical location for where this takes place. So basically, if you go straight north out of Tehran and to the Caspian Sea, that town that's right there is Chalice.
Oh, okay, so that's not a very far drive at all. Although they did mention something about the road being really busy and only one way or something, so that might have caused some of the issues. As far as, or just them feeling like they were actually a ways away from the city. The last time we were in this part of the world in full was with the physician dealing with Ibn Sina, played by Ben Kingsley, and that was in Isfahan, which is just more closer to the center of Iran now. Again, we did talk about Iran a little bit when we were talking about the cultural issues with the Middle East, when we were talking about Wajah. It is important to make the distinction that Saudis are Arab and Iranians are Persian, so they are even culturally and ethnically a completely different people, completely different language. They just happen to share a little bit of geography and religion, but a very different people.
Right. It's also important to point out that Iran is Shia, majority Shia, and Saudis are majority Sunni.
Right, which is why their rivalry is so heated.
Right. They're essentially like the Middle Eastern version of, the United States and the Soviets during the Cold War.
Or Pakistan and India is maybe more
right. But as in they fight proxy wars against each other. They fund groups that fight governments and groups that are sympathetic to each other. So they don't get along.
Culturally too, again, when you're watching this film, it really does just feel like it could be a group of Americans going out to a weekend at the beach. The difference being the women constantly wearing the hijab, which, again, as we kind of mentioned in Waja, is really more cultural than it is religious.
Yeah. And you even see in this movie, it's almost like a
fashion accessory.
A fashion accessory, but it's almost not really, it's kind of incidental. Like, it does a lot to, and I don't know if this was on purpose or not, but it kind of it shows that these are just normal people that happen to live somewhere else. Like
exactly.
The women are still like
very modern.
They're not downtrodden. They're standing up. They stand up for themselves. They're arguing with the men.
They get an equal vote in where we're going to stay for the weekend.
Right.
Yes.
Right. They take a vote to stay somewhere, and the women get just as much say as the men. And granted, this is in this one group in this one movie. The guy. Is it Amir? What's Sepeda's husband's name?
I think that's right.
Yeah, so Amir at one point gets mad at Sepeda and hits her, but no one is like, well, that's better. Right. Best leave him alone because that's
They're
his
getting
business.
In his face, yeah.
Right, they immediately run out there and get in his face, and like the other guy's wife starts yelling at him and is like, you should be ashamed of yourself.
Right, and he feels guilty instantly too. Yeah.
Right, and in no way is it framed as
this is the norm.
He's beating her because it's the norm and because he thinks that he has this power over her. It's more like he's out of his mind because of all the stress of the situation that they're dealing with.
Right,
and he kind of snaps and turns to violence.
That this girl they hardly know got killed on their trip.
Right,
and the other thing too, and I heard a Muslim somewhere at some point on TV make this comparison when asked about the hijab. And they were just talking about the cultural history of it. And they said something that just always stuck with me because I never thought about it this way. They're like, it goes back to the same historical, cultural roots as you think of the Virgin Mary always basically wearing, for all intents and purposes, a hijab. And it's that same kind of veiled face or veiled head. Yeah. And that was they just still do it in this part of the world. And we don't.
And it's when I was in Dubai last year, that was something that one of the tour guides that we had was talking about it. And he said, a lot like in the West, people think that it's weird for Muslim women to wear a hijab, but they won't think twice about a nun wearing what is essentially
exactly. There you go.
Not the same thing, but a headdress.
Right.
And it's just a sign of their devotion to their faith.
Right. Now, and then it gets tricky though too. You think about France having outlawed, of course there's different levels because obviously Saudi had the full on, there's different names, or the abaya, where there's basically there's different terms, and I can't keep track of what piece of clothing is what because we just haven't grown up with it, but France has outlawed certain ones, and that gets tricky because yes, it's easy for the West, and I mean I probably fall in this too, where I feel like it seems like it has sexist roots because you're covering up the women, and that just seems inherently sexist, and so France is trying to defend women, but there's some women within that faith who they don't feel it that way, and they feel like they want to do it, and to what extent is the state responsible for trying to break that tradition? And it's tricky. It's a mess. I kind of do wish it didn't exist,
very messy.
But I also feel like, again, if you're talking about freedom of religion, it's complicated. It's complicated.
Right, and not every situation is equal. So obviously. Right. Someone wearing it doesn't necessarily inform the reasons for it, which I think can make it an oppressive or a not oppressive thing, or just a showing of your faith, or whatever.
Right, because I always say at some point, you think about conflicts today over dress codes in the United States, whether it's, wearing yoga pants or, how short are shorts at schools and stuff. So,
or wearing a mask in the grocery store.
Right. Yes, because yes, we are still dealing with that.
Oh, don't worry. We probably still will be by the time this episode comes out, too. I'm calling it now.
Let's hope not. But yeah. Yeah, so as far as, again, we're kind of coming to the end of this project. This is the penultimate episode on our list of movies here. And as far as we kind of get to the modern day, so yeah, we haven't yet had a movie about, say, the Trump presidency or the coronavirus pandemic. So, and we've covered a lot of the big 21st century milestones with 9/11, the war on terror, social networking, and the financial crisis. So we kind of are just at wrapping up phase. So I do think this was an okay movie to include, to discuss Iran and just kind of modern life in different places around the world.
I did want to mention there were two performers in this movie that I did recognize from other stuff that I'd seen.
Oh.
The first one was Payman, who is played by a guy named Payman Mahdi.
It's easy for him to remember his character's name.
Right, which I couldn't place him initially. I was like, where have I seen him before? He's in, did you ever see the 13 Hours, the Benghazi embassy attack movie? Anyways, he plays the interpreter in that movie, like the interpreter for the group of contractors. So that's, I recognize him from that. The actress that I recognize, she's the main character. Her face is on the cover. She's not Elly, Sepida.
Sepida, yeah.
And her name, the actress's name is Gulshifta Farahani, which I had seen her in several things. She was in, most recently was in the Netflix movie Extraction with Chris Hemsworth. She's kind of the main female spy badass that comes and like initially recruits Chris Hemsworth at the beginning of the movie, and you see her a few times throughout. She's also in one of the Pirates of the Caribbean movies. She was in a movie in 2016 with Adam Driver called Patterson that I didn't see.
Yeah, so she's done a lot of Western stuff, yeah.
Yeah, she's a love interest in the 2008 movie Body of Lies with Leo DiCaprio. It's like kind of a spy thriller movie.
Well, that was even before About Elly, yeah.
Yeah, so she's been in quite a bit of stuff, in quite a bit of Western movies. She's actually the first Iranian actress to star in a Hollywood movie after the revolution in 1979.
Oh, is she the one you were saying isn't allowed to go back, though?
Yes, she's also the first Iranian actress to be in an Israeli movie, and she is currently banned from Saudi Arabia because in some of her movies, I guess she has appeared either topless or nude in at least one movie, because that was the reason that the article gave as to why she was not allowed to go back. But on her Wikipedia page, it shows her filmography, and in the notes section for each movie, there's like a ton of them that say ban in Iran, ban in Iran, ban in Iran, like over and over again. Basically,
they don't like the idea that an Iranian woman has done these American movies, and basically, we talk about having a hijab culturally. Yeah, being nude on film, kind of a no-no if you're Iranian.
Yeah. But she comes from an acting family. It kind of reminded me of like the Skarsgårds, like you got. So like her sister is an actress. Her father is like a famous actor and filmmaker in Iran. So she comes from like an entire like filmmaking performance family.
Okay. Yeah, and I had seen the guy you mentioned, Payman, in Separate. He's the lead in Separation that won the Oscar for Best Foreign Film. So I guess I had seen him there, but didn't necessarily recognize him.
Yeah, I think actually both of them have been in
other Farhadi movies. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so tune in next week for the final world history episode of History and Film with a favorite of mine from the 21st century, Midnight in Paris.